Imagine, imagine pulling up stakes.
Right.
I mean, literally packing up your entire life into whatever you can carry.
Yeah, just leaving it all behind.
Exactly. You are leaving the only home your family has known for generations.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing it to cross thousands of miles of the country for a job in a place you've never been.
In a city where you aren't even entirely sure they're going to welcome you when you arrive.
Right. It is just this massive leap of faith into a complete void.
It really is. The sheer psychological weight of that decision, it's staggering to even consider.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. And the dossier we're looking at today, it's titled Liberty Ships, Closed Doors.
Yeah.
And it frames this not just as like a leap made by a few brave families, but as a total demographic earthquake.
A massive shift.
Exactly. We are looking at a historical movement that fundamentally redrew the social, economic, and frankly, the physical map of the United States.
The Second Great Migration.
Yes. Specifically, we're focusing on the 1940s. That's when over 1 million Black Southerners left the rural Jim Crow South.
They aimed for these industrial centers, right?
They did. But particularly, they were opening up an entirely new frontier on the West Coast.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the mission of our deep dive today, for you listening, is to really get under the hood of the why and the how.
Mm-hmm.
The dossier presents a narrative that, well, it demands we hold two deeply contradictory truths in our minds at the exact same time.
Which is always the hardest part of history, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because on one hand, it outlines a migration that served as a genuine economic emancipation for hundreds of thousands of people.
Right, a real step forward.
But simultaneously, it documents a reality where the freedom they found was, it was partial.
Yeah, very partial.
It was fiercely policed and heavily resistant.
Exactly. It's this incredibly measured documentary look at people who were desperately needed for their labor.
But actively fought against regarding their actual physical presence.
That's it, exactly. And to even begin to grasp how those two truths coexisted, we have to start at the origin point.
The push.
Right, the push. We have to understand the immense forces that made staying in the South just totally untenable.
And the baseline of that push, for millions of Black Americans in the first half of the 20th century,
was the systemic reality of Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And we have to be clear here. This was not merely a set of, bad social customs.
No, not at all.
It was a deeply entrenched legal and political framework.
Designed specifically to strip Black citizens of the vote.
Yes, and to enforce strict segregation in every conceivable public space.
While maintaining a rigid racial hierarchy through the omnipresent threat of physical violence.
Exactly. That is the social atmosphere they were breathing every day.
Right.
But the engine that actually kept people tied to the land, the economic baseline.
That was the sharecropping system.
It was the sharecropping system.
And I want to spend some time on the mechanics of sharecropping here.
It's crucial that we do.
Because, the term gets thrown around a lot in history classes as a sort of synonym for just poor farming.
Right, they just didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah. But the sources detail a system that is incredibly calculated.
It was extremely precise.
It wasn't just low-wage labor. It was an intricate mathematical trap.
A trap is the perfect word for it.
I used to think of it like a rigged casino game, where the house always wins no matter how hard you play.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
But reading through the actual ledger mechanics in the dossier, a better comparison is a company town where you're paid in scrip, combined with, a predatory payday loan.
The ledger system is exactly the right mechanism to focus on here.
Let's break it down.
Okay, so sharecropping was meticulously designed to replicate the economic conditions of slavery.
But without invoking the terminology.
Precisely. Here is how it functioned on a practical level for the listener to really visualize.
Okay.
Families worked land they did not own. And because they had zero capital, they had to rely on the landowner, or sometimes a local furnish merchant.
For what?
For every single thing they needed to survive the year.
Like farming supplies.
Yes. They needed seeds to plant, mules to plow, tools to harvest.
Wow.
But also basic food and clothing just to literally live through the season.
All of which was provided on credit, right?
On credit. With exorbitant, completely unregulated interest rates.
Of course.
And here's the kicker. The landowner kept the books.
Right, so you don't even get to see the math.
Exactly. Throughout the year, the family would just draw against their future share of the crop.
Just racking up debt.
Racking up debt. Then, when the cotton was finally harvested and taken to market, the settle-up occurred.
And how did that go?
Well, the landowner would calculate the value of the family's share of the cotton.
Okay.
And then they would subtract the accumulated debt from the ledger.
Yeah.
But because the landowners controlled the accounting entirely.
And because literacy rates were intentionally suppressed among Black Southerners.
Right. The math miraculously always worked out so that the family either exactly broke even.
Or, more commonly, they ended the year owing the landowner money, which legally bound them to stay and work the land for another year to pay off that debt.
Exactly. It's a perpetual motion machine of poverty.
It's just devastating to think about.
It really is.
But, if that system was so insanely profitable for the landowners, what broke it?
Well, that's where the technology comes in.
Right, because the dossier points heavily to mechanization.
Yes.
Specifically, it talks about the tractor and the mechanical cotton picker.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at the timeline here, and it seems a little bit disconnected to me.
How so?
Well, if the mechanical cotton picker didn't become a widespread, ubiquitous piece of farming equipment until the 1950s,
Yeah, that's true.
how did it serve as a massive push factor in 1941?
Ah.
Were people actually being replaced by machines at the start of the war? Or were they just fleeing the violence and the debt?
This raises an important question, and the distinction you're making about the timeline is really critical to understanding the exact mechanism of the push.
Okay, lay it out for us.
You are correct. The fully mechanized cotton picker was not yet rolling across every single field in the Mississippi Delta in 1941.
Right.
However, the early 1940s marked the irreversible beginning of that transition.
Okay, I see.
The introduction of gasoline-powered tractors was already allowing landowners to consolidate their plots.
Meaning they needed fewer people.
Exactly. They were reducing the number of tenant farmers they needed.
So it wasn't the final blow of the cotton picker itself, but it was sort of the writing on the wall.
Precisely. The early adoption of these technologies sent a massive shockwave through the Southern economy.
People could see what was going.
Oh, absolutely. Landowners began to view the enormous hand labor force that cotton had historically required as an impending surplus.
Like, we don't need you anymore.
Exactly. So they started changing the terms of sharecropping agreements.
Just arbitrarily.
Yeah. They started evicting some families entirely and transitioning to just paying wage labor for a few tractor drivers instead of keeping dozens of sharecropping families.
Wow. So the psychological and economic certainty of the sharecropping system,
Yeah.
as brutal as it was.
It began to crack.
Yeah.
The dossier actually cites historians who refer to this specific window as a second emancipation.
A second emancipation. That's a powerful phrase.
It really is. The iron grip that bound people to the soil was loosening.
Right.
The system was deciding it no longer required its captive workforce.
And this is happening right at the precipice of a historical moment when the rest of the country was about to demand labor on a scale never before seen.
Exactly. The timing is incredible.
Okay, so the push is absolute.
Yeah.
You have a system that enforces your poverty through rigged ledgers.
Mm-hmm.
It polices your very existence through systemic violence.
Right.
And now it's actively signaling that your physical labor is becoming obsolete anyway.
Right. You're being pushed out.
But a push only gets a family to pack their bags.
Yes.
It doesn't draw the map of where they go.
No, it doesn't.
To understand the destination, we have to understand the pull.
And the pull in 1941 was the arsenal of democracy.
The war effort.
Yes. The outbreak of World War II created an economic vacuum that really defies modern comparison.
Just hard to even imagine.
The United States government, preparing for this massive global conflict, began demanding ships, aircraft, munitions, infrastructure.
Just at an impossible pace.
An absolutely impossible pace. And simultaneously, the military draft was pulling millions of able-bodied young men out of the domestic workforce.
Right, they're all going overseas.
Exactly.
Right.
So you have an infinite demand for production colliding with a rapidly depleting labor pool.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because basic logic dictates that if a shipyard desperately needs workers to fulfill a government contract,
Right.
they will hire literally anyone who shows up at the gate.
You would think so.
Right. But the dossier makes it painfully clear that the free market did not simply override prejudice.
Not at all.
Even with a bottomless demand for labor, major defense contractors were perfectly content to keep their doors firmly shut to black workers.
It's a stunning reality.
They were willing to bottleneck the defense of the country rather than integrate their assembly lines.
Oh, yes.
So the door didn't open naturally, it had to be forced off its hinges.
That is the pivotal turning point in this entire narrative.
Yeah.
If we view the migrants as simply being swept up by abstract macroeconomic forces, we miss the reality of their agency.
Their own power in this.
Exactly. These jobs were secured through a calculated, high-stakes political strategy.
Orchestrated by Black leadership.
Yes, most notably A. Philip Randolph.
Let's talk about A. Philip Randolph, because he is one of those figures whose strategic brilliance literally altered the demographics of the country.
Oh, without question.
Walk us through his maneuver in 1941, because the leverage he utilized was just phenomenal.
It was brilliant. So Randolph was a towering figure in the labor movement.
He was the president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, right?
He was. And he looked at this booming defense industry, saw the blatant refusal to hire Black Americans, and realized that appeals to morality were just failing.
Asking nicely wasn't working.
Right. So he turned to political brinkmanship.
What did he do?
In early 1941, this is months before the attack on Pearl Harbor, he organized the March on Washington movement.
Right.
He publicly threatened President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Directly threatened the president.
Directly. He said that unless the defense industries were open to Black workers, he would bring tens of thousands of Black Americans to march down Pennsylvania Avenue to protest racial discrimination.
I try to put myself in Roosevelt's shoes in that exact moment.
It's quite a scenario.
He is actively trying to unite the country behind the idea of defending global democracy against fascism.
Right.
He is positioning America as the moral counterweight to Nazi Germany.
Exactly.
And a massive, highly visible protest in the nation's capital.
Exposing the deep, systemic racism of the American war machine itself.
It would have been an international public relations catastrophe.
It was Roosevelt's absolute nightmare.
I bet.
It would have provided infinite propaganda for the Axis powers.
Right. Look at how America treats its own people.
Exactly. Randolph knew exactly what he was doing. He found the one pressure point the White House could not ignore.
So what did Roosevelt do?
To head off the march, on June 25, 1941, Roosevelt issued Executive Order 8802.
The order that banned racial discrimination in the defense industries.
Yes.
But I have a major mechanical question about this.
Okay.
An executive order is just a piece of paper signed in a distant office.
Right.
You can decree that a shipyard in California or an aircraft plant in Seattle must stop discriminating.
Mm-hmm.
But how did that actually translate to a hiring manager looking at a Black applicant at the factory gate?
That's the real question.
The prejudice didn't just vanish because the president signed a document.
Mm-hmm.
How was this actually enforced?
Well, the enforcement mechanism was the Fair Employment Practice Committee, or the FEPC.
Okay, the FEPC,
Right.
which was established by the order.
Exactly. And to your point, the FEPC was initially incredibly weak.
Like they didn't have much power.
Very little. It did not possess subpoena power.
Oh, wow.
It could not issue cease and desist orders.
So what could it even do?
It was a committee with a tiny budget and a massive mandate.
So how did it accomplish anything at all?
It relied on two main things: public shaming through hearings, and the ultimate underlying threat that the federal government could cancel a defense contract if a company egregiously refused to comply.
Ah, hitting them in the wallet.
Right. The dossier details how the FEPC would hold these public hearings in major industrial cities.
And do what?
They'd force executives to testify under oath about their hiring practices.
Which nobody wanted to do.
Nobody. It didn't magically erase prejudice, obviously.
Right.
And many companies still dragged their feet, relegating Black workers to only the most menial, dangerous jobs initially.
Just doing the bare minimum to comply.
Exactly. But combined with the crushing reality of the labor shortage,
Yeah.
Executive Order 8802 acted as a wedge.
A wedge.
It provided a legal and federal backing that had never existed before. It cracked the door just enough.
And once there was a crack.
Millions of people pushed through it.
Man, and once that wedge is in the door, the resulting flood of people completely rewrites the map of the United States.
Completely.
And we really need to distinguish this wartime wave from what came before it.
Yes, that's very important.
Because we're talking about the Second Great Migration today.
Which implies a first.
Right. So how did the geography of this 1940s movement differ from the earlier migrations?
The contrast is stark, both in the scale of the movement and the actual destination.
Okay, let's start with the first one.
So the first Great Migration occurred roughly between 1910 and 1940, mostly surrounding the First World War.
Okay.
During that period, about 1.6 million Black Southerners moved.
And where did they go?
The tracks largely led north. They followed established rail lines to the massive industrial centers of the Northeast and the Midwest.
Places like Chicago, Detroit, New York.
Exactly. Cleveland, Pittsburgh. They carved out major cultural footholds in those cities.
So the path was already somewhat established by the time the second wave came around.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you were a family leaving Mississippi in 1925, you probably knew an uncle or a cousin in Chicago.
Right.
You knew to look for the Chicago Defender newspaper. There was a groove cut into the map.
A very clear groove. But the Second Great Migration shatters that old map.
How so?
Well, the numbers alone represent a paradigm shift.
Let's hear them.
Between 1940 and 1970, over 5 million Black Southerners left the region.
5 million.
Just in the 1940s, the single decade we are focusing on today, approximately 1.45 million people made the journey.
Almost the same amount as the entire first migration, but just in one decade.
Exactly. And while many continued to flow into Chicago and Detroit, following those old grooves, the defining characteristic of this wartime wave was the opening of the West Coast.
And the dossier emphasizes this heavily.
It does.
It talks about cities like Los Angeles, Oakland, Richmond, Portland, Seattle. These were cities that, prior to 1941, had incredibly small Black populations.
Very small.
They were not historic hubs of Black culture in the way Harlem or the South Side of Chicago were.
Right.
And the Bay Area is the specific microcosm the dossier zooms in on.
The data for the San Francisco Bay Area is just astonishing.
Give us the numbers.
Between 1941 and 1945, which is a mere 4 years, the Bay Area drew more than 46,000 Black migrants.
46,000 people in 4 years. I really want to visualize the logistics of that.
It's hard to picture.
Like, how are 46,000 people moving from the rural South to Northern California in the early 1940s?
Well, they were coming predominantly from Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas.
Okay.
And they were utilizing the Southern Pacific Railroad.
For taking trains.
Taking trains, packing into segregated train cars for these grueling multi-day journeys across the desert Southwest.
Just incredibly difficult travel.
Very difficult. And others pooled money for gasoline and drove overloaded cars across Route 66 and southern highways.
Which must have been perilous in the Jim Crow era.
Extremely perilous. They were navigating a landscape where they often couldn't legally buy a meal or rent a room.
Wow.
And the destination wasn't some quiet arrival. They were pulling up to the perimeters of industrial behemoths.
Places like the Henry Kaiser shipyards in Richmond.
Yes. Or Marin Ship in Sausalito.
And these weren't standard factories.
Not at all. They were massive, sprawling complexes operating 24 hours a day.
Just churning out Liberty ships at a pace that seems fictional today.
It really does. And the sensory whiplash of that arrival must have been profound.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
You have families transitioning from the quiet, isolated, sun-dictated rhythms of agricultural sharecropping to the deafening, mechanized, arc-welded roar of wartime shipbuilding.
It's like landing on another planet.
It really is. But beyond the sensory shift, there is a deep social distinction here, too.
What do you mean?
Moving to a West Coast shipyard town in 1942 was fundamentally different from moving to Chicago in 1920.
I am trying to wrap my head around that difference.
Okay.
If you go to Chicago, you are joining an existing metropolis.
Right.
Moving to Richmond, California in 1942, you are stepping onto a completely blank slate, aren't you?
You are. In the West, these migrants were really the pioneers of their own communities.
Right.
They were stepping into towns that lacked the established Black churches, the social clubs, the businesses.
The infrastructure just wasn't there.
Exactly. The infrastructure that existed in the North was totally absent.
So they had to build it themselves.
They were forced to build their entire social safety net from scratch.
While simultaneously working these grueling industrial shifts.
Right. And while navigating a local white population that was entirely unaccustomed to their presence in such large numbers.
It really was a frontier experience.
It was a frontier experience occurring inside an urban industrial framework.
And what made that immense struggle? The journey, the culture shock, the grueling labor.
Yeah.
What made all of it worth the risk was the economic reality of the shipyard.
Absolutely.
The dossier uses a phrase that really stuck with me. Emancipation by the hour.
Emancipation by the hour. It is a perfect distillation of what occurred.
It's so evocative.
To understand the gravity of that phrase, we have to contrast the pre-migration earning power with the industrial wage.
Well, we talked about the sharecropping ledger earlier.
Right.
Where a year's labor might literally end in negative numbers.
Yes.
Or domestic labor in the South, which the sources note often paid pennies a day.
Exactly. Compared to that, the union scale wages inside a Kaiser shipyard represented an economic tectonic shift.
Just a totally different world.
The data shows that industrial wages frequently doubled or even tripled what these individuals could have theoretically earned under the absolute best-case scenarios in the South.
Just imagine the psychological impact of the time clock. You punch in, you weld steel for 8 hours, you punch out, and at the end of the week, you receive a predictable, legally enforced envelope of cash.
It changes everything.
You are no longer waiting for the harvest. You are no longer subject to the furnished merchant's rigged math.
It is the foundation of generational wealth.
Yeah.
For the vast majority of these families, this was unequivocally the most significant economic transformation of their lives.
I mean, how could it not be?
It moved them from a system of perpetual debt peonage directly into the modern American working class.
And a tripled salary meant the ability to save.
It meant buying war bonds.
Sending money back to relatives still trapped in the South.
Yes. And it introduced the tangible possibility of homeownership.
So what does this all mean for the narrative?
Wow.
If the story stopped right here, it would be a flawless triumph, right?
It would be.
The push of Jim Crow meets the pull of the arsenal of democracy. The people move, they get the jobs, they get the wages. The American dream is realized.
Right, a perfect Hollywood ending.
But the dossier explicitly warns us not to flatten this history.
No, we can't do that.
We have to address the second truth we talked about at the beginning, the closed door.
The wage packet was absolutely real.
Yeah.
But the assumption that economic integration equaled social or political integration is completely false.
Right.
The migrants secured the jobs, but they immediately hit a brick wall the moment they stepped off the shipyard property.
Like the exact second they left work.
Exactly. The welcome they received stopped violently at the factory gate.
Let's examine the architecture of that wall, starting with the most immediate crisis.
Housing.
Housing was a nightmare.
You have 46,000 new arrivals in the Bay Area alone.
Right.
The cities are not built for this influx. So where are these families physically sleeping?
They were forced into a housing market that was heavily policed and rigidly segregated.
Even in California.
Especially in California.
Yeah.
The white power structures in West Coast cities, anticipating this demographic shift, utilized both legal and extra-legal means to hem the migrants into highly specific, vastly overcrowded zones. And the primary legal tool being the restrictive covenant.
Yes.
I want to break down exactly how a restrictive covenant functioned mechanically.
It's important to understand the mechanics of it.
Because it wasn't just like a racist landlord deciding not to rent to someone.
No, not at all.
It was far more insidious and structural.
It was deeply structural. A restrictive covenant was a legally binding clause written directly into the deed of a property.
The actual deed.
The deed itself. It explicitly prohibited the owner from selling, renting, or sometimes even leasing the property to anyone who was not Caucasian.
And these weren't like secret backdoor agreements.
No, they were public.
Yeah.
They were upheld by neighborhood associations backed by the real estate industry.
And crucially, they were enforceable by state courts.
Exactly. If a white homeowner attempted to sell their home to a black shipyard worker, their white neighbors could literally sue them in court to block the sale based on that deed restriction.
That is just, it's an agonizing paradox.
It is.
Through sheer grit and grueling industrial labor, these families finally acquire the capital to achieve the American dream, buying a home.
Right. They finally have the money.
But the legal system itself gerrymanders the map to ensure their money is useless outside of designated slums.
Exactly. The capital was neutralized by the covenant.
Wow.
This forced the massive influx of migrants into federal war housing projects, which were strictly segregated by government policy anyway.
Right. Or where else did they go?
Into makeshift, unincorporated trailer camps.
Like shantytowns.
Basically. Thrown up in the mudflats near the shipyards, lacking basic plumbing or sanitation.
It's just so wrong.
They were building the ships to save the free world, but they were legally barred from living in the neighborhoods built right around those shipyards.
The housing situation is infuriating, but there is a second pillar to this wall that I find even more logically contradictory.
The unions.
Yes, the unions. It happened inside the shipyards themselves.
The union situation reveals the absolute depth of the systemic hypocrisy here.
Explain how that worked.
Well, these shipyards, particularly operations like Marin Ship and Sausalito, operated under closed shop agreements.
Okay, meaning what?
This meant that in order to be employed by the company, you were legally required to be a member of the labor union representing your trade.
Like the Boilermakers or shipbuilders unions.
Exactly. Most notably, the powerful Boilermakers Union.
Okay, but wait. We established that Executive Order 8802 forced the companies to hire black workers.
Yes. It forced the companies to hire them.
Right.
It did not force the unions to admit them.
Are you kidding me?
The Constitution of the International Boilermakers Union contained a strict clause barring black individuals from membership.
Wait. Let me follow the logic of this mechanism.
It's dizzying.
The government says the company must hire you.
Right.
The company says you must be in the union to work.
Yes.
The union says you are racially prohibited from joining.
Exactly.
That is a perfect, inescapable catch-22.
It was designed to be.
So how did anyone actually get onto the factory floor?
The union leadership devised a workaround that was profoundly exploitative. The auxiliary union.
The auxiliary union.
Yes. They created separate subordinate lodges specifically for black workers.
Like a separate but equal kind of thing.
Separate but absolutely not equal. In Sausalito, it was Auxiliary Lodge A41.
I am bracing myself for how this functioned. Did it just mean they met in a different building?
Oh, it was much worse than that. It meant they were stripped of all democratic rights while still paying the exact same fees.
They still had to pay dues.
Black workers were forced, as a condition of employment, to pay union dues to the main white-controlled local.
Wow.
However, membership in the Auxiliary Lodge granted them absolutely no voting rights in the main union.
None.
None. They could not vote on leadership. They could not participate in negotiating their own contracts.
Could they file a grievance?
No, they could not file a grievance if they were mistreated by a foreman.
So they were paying for nothing.
They were forced to finance the very organization that was actively disenfranchising them.
It is literal taxation without representation.
It's the definition of it.
I mean, you cross the entire country to escape a system designed to exploit your labor and deny your vote.
Mm-hmm.
You take up the hardest, most dangerous work in a shipyard to build the arsenal of democracy to defeat fascism abroad.
Right.
You pay your hard-earned wages in union dues, and the union legally denies you the right to vote in your own hall.
The contradiction is staggering.
How did the workers respond to this? They couldn't have just accepted that reality.
What's fascinating here is the precise nature of their resistance.
Yeah.
They recognized the hypocrisy immediately, and they utilized their agency to dismantle it.
Good.
They did not passively accept the auxiliary status.
What did it do?
They organized Committee Against Segregation groups. They staged protests.
In the middle of the war.
In the middle of the war. And critically, they utilized the legal system.
Okay.
This friction culminated in a landmark legal battle that the dossier highlights, James v. Marinship.
Let's dive deep into James v. Marinship, because this is a perfect example of how the migrants actively fought the closed doors.
It's a crucial case.
Who was Joseph James?
Joseph James was a deeply impressive figure.
Yeah?
Before the war, he was a well-known, highly educated concert singer who had actually toured internationally.
Okay. Concert singer.
Yes. But when the war broke out, he moved to San Francisco and took a job as a welder at the Marin shipyards in Sausalito to support the war effort.
Wow.
He was exactly the kind of highly capable, articulate worker the shipyards desperately needed.
And I'm guessing he runs headfirst into the auxiliary union trap.
He does. When the Boilermakers Union demanded that James and over 1,000 other black workers at Marinship pay dues into the segregated Auxiliary A41 or face termination,
You refuse.
he refused. He argued that he would gladly pay dues for equal representation, but he would not subsidize his own discrimination.
That is incredibly brave.
It was. And in late 1943, under pressure from the union, Marinship actually began firing the black workers who refused to pay the auxiliary dues.
Firing desperately needed welders in the middle of a global war because of union racism.
Exactly.
It's just unbelievable.
So Joseph James, representing the black workers, filed an injunction against both Marinship and the Boilermakers Union.
Okay.
And the case wound its way all the way up to the California Supreme Court.
Now what happened?
In 1945, Chief Justice Phil Gibson delivered a unanimous ruling in favor of James.
Unanimous. What was the legal rationale? How did they break the catch-22?
The court ruled that a union could not simultaneously maintain a closed-shop agreement with an employer and an artificially closed union membership.
That makes perfect sense.
The logic was brilliant in its simplicity. If a union operates as a monopoly on labor, it cannot arbitrarily restrict membership based on race.
Because doing so deprives citizens of their fundamental right to earn a living.
Exactly. The court declared the auxiliary unions discriminatorial and illegal.
It is an incredible victory.
It really is.
And it underscores the agency of the migrants. They weren't just fleeing, they were fighting and winning legal battles that set the precedent for the modern civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
But the resistance to their presence wasn't solely bureaucratic or legal, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was physical.
Right.
The dossier points out that this immense demographic shift triggered violent backlash from white workers and neighbors.
The tension must have been explosive.
It was. You have massive overcrowding, intense competition for severely limited housing, and a deeply ingrained racial hierarchy colliding in real time.
And how did that manifest?
This manifested on the factory floors as hate strikes.
Hate strikes.
White workers would literally walk off the assembly lines, halting the production of critical war materials.
Wow.
Simply to protest a black worker being promoted to a skilled welding position or operating a crane alongside them.
The prejudice was so deep, they were willing to sabotage the war effort.
They were, and the friction inevitably spilled out of the shipyards and into the streets.
The summer of 1943, right?
Yes. It's often referred to as a summer of violence. Massive race riots erupted in major industrial centers across the country.
Like where?
Mobile, Alabama, Detroit, Michigan, Los Angeles, California.
The physical environment was a pressure cooker.
And the white establishment was determined to keep the lid on it through force.
This forces us to really absorb the complexity of what the dossier is asking of us.
We have to.
We cannot flatten the South into a caricature of pure evil.
Right.
And we absolutely cannot flatten the North and the West into a promised land.
No, the West Coast maintained its own insidious, structural, and often violent brand of segregation.
The emancipation by the hour was a reality.
Yes.
The tripled wages transformed family trajectories.
Yeah.
But the freedom was incredibly partial.
Extremely partial.
It was boxed in by restrictive covenants, choked by corrupt union bylaws, and violently resisted by the existing population.
That is the nuanced reality of the Second Great Migration.
Yeah.
It was a monumental, historic step forward, but it was a step onto a new kind of battlefield.
A battlefield that didn't just go away.
No. And the tension of that battlefield did not simply evaporate when the Japanese surrendered in 1945.
Right. What happened then?
Well, the war ended, the massive government contracts dried up, the Kaiser and Marin shipyards laid off tens of thousands of workers.
But the people didn't go back to the South.
Exactly. They did not go back.
And that brings us to the final piece of this deep dive.
Whoa.
The long shadow.
A legacy.
Because the decisions made in 1942 about who could live where and who could build wealth laid the literal concrete foundation for the modern American West.
It's all connected. The communities built under the extreme duress of wartime segregation outlasted the shipyards.
Right.
The populations that flowed into Los Angeles, Oakland, Richmond, and Seattle stayed.
And those cities became the new epicenters of post-war black culture and the burgeoning civil rights struggle.
Yes. But because of the structural disadvantages embedded during the war, these communities faced a deeply uneven post-war landscape.
The dossier provides a very grounded, specific example to illustrate this long-term impact.
Marin City.
Marin City, right next to the old Marin shipyards in Sausalito.
Okay.
Walk us through what happens to a community like that when the war ends.
Okay, so Marin City was originally hastily constructed as federal housing for the shipyard workers.
Just temporary stuff.
Right. When the war ended and the shipyard closed, a massive economic contraction occurred.
Everyone loses their jobs.
Exactly. But the impact of that contraction was racially disparate.
How so?
Many of the white shipyard workers utilized the post-war economic boom, and crucially, they utilized the GI Bill.
Ah, the GI Bill.
Yes. Benefits that were often systematically denied or made administratively impossible for black veterans to access.
And the white workers also had access to the new suburban housing tract.
Right, because they weren't blocked by restrictive covenants.
So they just move out.
Correct. The white workers moved out to the newly built, federally subsidized suburbs, beginning the process of building massive generational wealth through home equity.
The classic American post-war boom.
Yes. But the black workers from Marin Ship.
They were restricted by redlining practices from banks.
Banks that literally refused to issue mortgages in certain neighborhoods.
And they were blocked by the covenants everywhere else.
Exactly. So they largely could not move. They remained in Marin City.
The dossier notes a very personal connection here, actually.
Yes.
The compiler of the dossier mentions that their father served as a physician in that specific Marin City community in the 1950s.
And the compiler themselves attended school there.
It is a striking reminder that we are not talking about ancient abstract history.
No, this is very recent.
The descendants of the workers who rode the segregated trains from Louisiana and fought the auxiliary unions, They are the people living in these communities today.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Second Great Migration anchors nearly everything we understand about the urban geography of the West today.
Yeah.
When the layoffs came in 1945, these black workers were the last hired, first fired.
Always the first to go.
Always. When the banks drew red lines on city maps to designate hazardous areas for lending.
They trace the exact boundaries of the wartime segregated housing tracts.
Exactly. And in the decades that followed, when cities executed urban renewal projects,
They drove interstate highways directly through the hearts of these newly established black communities.
wow. I want you to pause for a moment and think about the physical map of the city you live in right now. Think about the specific neighborhoods. Think about where the generational wealth is concentrated and where the industrial zones are.
Right.
Think about the exact routes the highways take through your downtown.
It's all there.
How much of your lived reality today, the literal concrete and property lines of 2026, was drawn by the wartime opportunity and the deliberate closed-door exclusion of the 1940s?
It is the longest shadow of the domestic war effort.
It really is.
The Great Migration successfully redrew the physical demographics of the country, providing millions with an escape from the agricultural traps of the South.
But the walls, built inside the gates of the West Coast, redrew the economic and social map in profound structural ways that society is still actively attempting to navigate and dismantle.
It is a phenomenal journey to try and wrap our heads around.
It's a lot to take in.
We started in the sharecropping fields, looking at a ledger system mathematically designed to trap families in perpetual debt enforced by the terror of Jim Crow.
Right.
We analyzed how the slow creep of the tractor began pushing people off that land, creating a second emancipation. We saw how the explosion of World War II created an insatiable pull for labor.
A pull that was only realized when A. Philip Randolph leveraged the threat of a massive march to force the signing of Executive Order 8802.
Then we tracked the logistical reality of that movement,
The over 5 million people who altered the country's trajectory.
focusing on the unique frontier experience of the West Coast.
Right. Tens of thousands arriving at massive shipyards like Henry Kaiser's and Marin Ship.
Securing an emancipation by the hour that broke the cycle of agricultural poverty. Yet, we simultaneously explored the reality of the closed doors,
The legal trap of restrictive covenants.
the exploitative mechanics of auxiliary unions,
The incredible courage of Joseph James fighting back in the Supreme Court.
and the violent pushback of hate strikes.
It is the story of holding two truths, really.
Yeah?
Building an entirely new life, gaining unprecedented economic footing, while simultaneously fighting tooth and nail for the basic right to exist within the democracy you are building the weapons to defend.
It demands an incredible level of respect for the resilience required just to survive it.
Absolutely.
Which brings us back to the image we started with.
The packed bags.
The profound leap of faith. Trusting that your own hands could build a future, even when the system was actively working to limit the blueprint.
The entire history forces us to think critically about the mechanisms of progress.
It does.
And it leaves me with one final lingering thought for you to explore on your own long after we finish today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We analyzed how it took the existential, terrifying threat of a global world war.
A true crisis.
A crisis of unimaginable scale, threatening the existence of democracy itself.
Yeah.
It took that to overcome the entrenched prejudice of the peacetime economy and force the door of economic mobility open for millions of American citizens.
Right.
So, looking at our world today, what doors in our society are currently being held artificially shut simply because we haven't yet faced a crisis massive enough to demand they be broken open?
That is a profound question, and one that reframes how we look at every barrier around us today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the courage, the complex mechanics, and the enduring legacy of the Second Great Migration. We'll catch you next time.